I was locked in a pig cage and thrown into the river. As my vision blurred and I was on the verge of drowning, a massive dark shadow slowly swam toward me from the darkness. It was a Jiao, a dragon in waiting. At that moment, a voice echoed in my mind.
Steal the fortune of the Marquis of Guangping for me, and I will give you a chance for revenge. How about it?
Though I couldn't speak, I agreed to the deal in my heart. The world before my eyes slowly faded into darkness. On my wedding day, I was abducted and sent into a bandit's den. Surviving against all odds, I managed to escape, only to find that my concubine-born younger sister had already married into the Marquis of Guangping's estate in my place. I wept and made a scene in the wedding hall, but a man's undergarment fell from my bodice, becoming ironclad proof of my loose morals. Amid everyone's spitting and curses, Fu Yunmo stood up with a troubled and pained expression, saying, "Qingyue, I believe you, but the Marquis's estate cannot accept a disgraced mistress. I can only ask you to endure this grievance." Thus, I became Fu Yunmo's concubine. But a year later, when my father's general's estate was executed to the last soul for treason, he locked me in a pig cage and sank me to the bottom of the river.
If it weren't for the general's estate being able to help me rise to power, a person like you would disgust me to even look at. Now that the general's estate has committed treason, the entire household has been beheaded. Only you are left.
My sister ordered her servants to tie a 1,000-pound stone to the pig cage, smiling with innocent malice.
Sister, you didn't cherish the bandit husband I gifted you and insisted on coming back to seduce Yunmo. Since you are so shameless, it would be unreasonable not to drown you in the river.
My eyes nearly split with rage. Amidst the agonizing suffocation, I swallowed my last breath in deep resentment. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the road escaping from the bandit's den. When I rushed into the wedding hall of the Marquis's estate, the boisterous clamor came to an abrupt halt. My mother, sitting in the main seat, had not yet wiped away the tears of joy from the corners of her eyes. When she looked up and met my gaze as I stood at the entrance, she froze in shock.
Qingyue, how are you here?
Her eyes, filled with disbelief, darted back and forth between me and the bridal chamber. With a pale face, she murmured,
"If you are here, then who was the one who performed the wedding ceremony with Fu Yunmo and was sent into the bridal chamber just now?"
Tears quickly welled up in my eyes. It was sister. She tricked me into going to the outskirts of town. I never expected it was so she could take my place in the bridal sedan and marry into the Marquis's manor. Her words stirred up a storm among the crowd. Father suddenly stood up from his seat. He scolded sharply.
Absurd. Has Song Xuxu lost her mind? Today is the day she is supposed to marry into the Shu family. Who gave her the audacity to covet her legitimate elder sister's marriage and dare to substitute herself for the bride? Go stop the bridal chamber at once. Tell Fu Yunmo that there has been a mistake with the bride.
The old madame of the Marquis's manor recovered from the shock and was the first to state her stance.
In-laws, there must be some misunderstanding here. Our Marquis's manor only recognizes Qingyue as our daughter-in-law.
As soon as she finished speaking, Song Xuxu's maid walked out, holding a snow-white handkerchief. The handkerchief was unfurled, and the prominent virginity stain on it made everyone present freeze in place. Unable to hide her pride, the maid said, "General's madame, old madame of the Marquis's manor. My young mistress has already given her innocence to the Marquis. She already belongs to the Marquis." Since they entered the bridal chamber, it had been less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Lifting the bridal veil, drinking the nuptial wine, going through the whole process. They shouldn't have consummated the marriage so quickly. Among the banquet guests, someone immediately whispered,
"What on earth is this? A concubine's daughter openly stealing her legitimate sister's marriage, rushing to throw away her chastity. She has completely lost her sense of shame. I heard that the second Miss Song, the concubine's daughter of the general's manor, was already betrothed to the Shu family of merchants."
She must have looked down on them for being merchants, so she deceived her legitimate sister to become the Marchioness herself. Wait, that is not right. Even if we didn't know the bride was switched, once the Marquis lifted the bridal veil, would he really not know?
The person who said this was immediately hushed by others. Everyone looked at one another, with various expressions on their faces. My father, burning with rage, pointed directly at the Dowager Marchioness.
Dowager Marchioness, don't tell me your son is blind, unable to even recognize his own bride. Or did he also have a hand in this bridal switch?
The Dowager Marchioness looked panicked.
In-law, this is a great injustice. This bride came from your general's estate. If a mistake was made, you can't blame it all on my son.
My mother, nearly choking with rage, shattered a porcelain bowl directly onto the floor. She ordered the senior maids behind her to fetch 3 feet of white silk and arsenic and deliver them to the bridal chamber for Song Xuxu to choose from.
"You cannot."
Concubine who had been lurking at the door for a long time, screamed and rushed inside. She fell to her knees with a thud, wailing loudly in front of everyone.
Madam, my Xuxu is pure, kind, and gentle. It was the eldest miss herself who missed the auspicious hour. To avoid delaying the marriage bestowed by His Majesty, my Xuxu was forced to board the bridal sedan. To save the entire general's estate, she sacrificed herself, yet, just to save your own daughter's face. You want to beat my Xuxu to death. How venomous your heart is.
What a fine excuse of being forced to board the sedan, I sneered in my heart. Concubine Hu had been waiting outside the Marquis's estate for at least half an hour. To say she knew nothing about the bridal switch, I wouldn't believe it even if I were beaten to death. Just then, the housekeeper of the general's estate rushed in.
Master, madame, the Xu family's bridal procession has arrived. They are already waiting at the gates of the general's estate, but we've searched the entire estate and we can't find the second miss anywhere.
Of course they couldn't find her. She had already entered the bridal chamber of the Marquis of Guangping and hastily consummated the marriage. My father's and mother's faces looked incredibly grim. Song Xuxu had deliberately had her maid bring out the stained handkerchief. It was to let everyone witness that her innocence had already been given to Fu Yunmo, and that she could never marry into the Xu family again. Though the Xu family are merchants with a lowly social status, much of the provisions my brother used to guard the border over the years came from them. My father values gratitude above all, which is why he betrothed Song Xuxu to the Xu family. Unwilling to accept this, Song Xuxu colluded with bandits to kidnap me and take my place in the marriage. If I hadn't escaped, I would have been violated and left to die. Even if I did escape, I wouldn't have been able to prove my innocence, regardless of my reputation. By tomorrow, either way, the legitimate daughter of the general protector of the state would become the laughingstock and the definition of a loose woman in the capital. In my past life, I broke my leg, dragged myself through the mud, and barely escaped with my life. I believed Song Xuxu's excuse that she only married into the Marquis's manor to save the general's household, but she tore my clothes open, and when a man's undergarments fell from my waist, everyone's malice pierced me like needles. I became an outcast, spat upon by everyone, falling from the high status of the general's legitimate daughter to a lowly concubine despised even by the servants. To ensure Fu Yunmo treated me well, my father supported him step by step to the center of power. Back then, I didn't know that this man, whom I loved with all my heart and saw as my savior, had long been carrying on an affair with Song Xuxu and get pregnant out of wedlock. He even had a hand in colluding with the bandits to have me killed. His affection for me was entirely fake, just waiting for the right moment to utterly destroy the general's manor. My mother's face turned cold, and she ordered the senior maids to drag Song Xuxu out of the room and bind her to be sent to the Xu family. Her marriage with Xu Lang had long been set. Once today's wedding date passed, she would be a wife of the Xu family. Whether the Xu family chose to beat or kill her would have nothing to do with the general's manor. Concubine Hu shoved the senior maid aside and grabbed father, crying out,
General, Xuxu is also your biological daughter. Since she and the Marquis have already crossed the line, just grant them their wish.
Furthermore, she cast a malicious glance at me.
The general's mansion doesn't have only one daughter. If Xuxu cannot repay the Xu family's kindness, naturally someone else can take her place.
Father's face turned livid with rage. He slapped Aunt Hu hard across the face.
Look at the daughter you raised, stealing her elder sister's marriage, seducing her own brother-in-law, and completely disgracing our general's mansion. Yet you still have the shameless audacity to suggest making my legitimate daughter marry into the Xu family in her stead. Don't think I don't know what you mother and daughter are plotting. Qingyue is my legitimate daughter. The best marriage naturally belongs to her. Song Xuxu is merely a concubine's daughter. If she cannot keep to her place, then do not blame me for disregarding our father-daughter bond. Even if the Xu family drowned Song Xuxu in a pond today, I will still have her bound and delivered to them.
Mother pulled Aunt Hu away.
Someone drag Aunt Hu back, lock her in the ancestral hall, and let her sober up properly.
Aunt Hu wailed hysterically as she was forcibly dragged away. Instantly, someone sneered with disdain.
What a scheming pair of mother and daughter. How audacious. Stealing the legitimate sister's marriage to marry into a noble house in her stead.
Simply shameless. Exactly. Only low-class people would do such things. General Song has truly suffered misfortune in his family.
Just then, Fu Yunmo rushed in from outside the door. A flicker of uneasiness crossed his face when he saw me.
Qingyue, you're back.
I sneered. Naturally, you didn't want me to return and ruin your good affair with Song Xuxu. His face turned pale as he interrupted.
Stop making a scene. You can't blame Xuxu for this. I drank too much earlier and mistook Xuxu for you. so we consummated the marriage. I would like to ask you instead, where on earth did you go on our wedding day? Our marriage was decreed by the emperor himself. If Xuxu hadn't taken your place in the bridal sedan, both the Marquis's manor and the general's manor would now be facing execution. Xuxu only lost her chastity to me because of you. She has made such a grand sacrifice, so the position of primary wife must be hers. This is what you owe her. Tomorrow, I will have a small sedan chair sent to welcome you through the side gate. Xuxu is gentle and kind, will surely be able to discipline your wild and fierce temperament.
When someone is speechless to the extreme, they really just want to laugh. That is the treatment of a concubine. His impoverished Marquis house had long been marginalized. If he hadn't been betrothed to me and received my father's support in court, how could he ever have the chance to be noticed by the emperor again? Yet he actually has the nerve to say such ridiculous words as letting me, the legitimate daughter of the general protector of the state, the absurd idea of making me his concubine. In my past life, I was framed by them because I misjudged their character. In this life, he is not even worthy of carrying my shoes. My father, furious, burst into a cold laugh.
The Marquis of Guangping certainly has some nerve, having enjoyed a few good days. He seems to have forgotten what it felt like when his house was in decline. Do you want me to help you jog your memory, making my legitimate daughter your concubine? Have you had too much to drink and damaged your brain, or has it made you blind? You can't even tell whether your own wife is a human or a ghost. A hypocrite like you, who keeps looking for something better while eating from his own bowl, is not worthy of my chinel at all.
Mother then turned her head to look at the old dowager Marchioness.
Old dowager, look at the fine son you have raised. He insulted our general's mansion and deceived my daughter. Do you think if the general's mansion submits a complaint to the emperor, your Marquis's mansion will still be able to see tomorrow's sun?
The dowager Marchioness clutched her chest. His face instantly turned deathly pale. She slapped her son across the face.
Yunmo, tell me, what on earth is going on here? Were you also a part of this bride-swapping scheme today?
Before Fu Yunmo could speak, Song Xuxu ran out, clutching her thin dress, crying and pleading her innocence.
Sister, why must you harm me like this?
Before anyone could react, they heard her cry out loudly.
It was you who told me last night that you hadn't had enough fun yet, and that you didn't want to marry the Marquis at all. You even said you had fallen in love with the bandit chief on Juyan Peak, and that you loved his rough and overbearing nature the most, and how he could make you feel dead to the world in bed. You said your body was already ruined from being played with, and you feared the Marquis would find out on the wedding night, so you forced me to take your place in the bridal chamber. I refused to agree. You threatened to kill my mother. I knew my status as a concubine's daughter was lowly, and that I had no power to fight against you. Now that my innocence is gone, I still have to face your frame-up and slander. I might as well bash my head and die to prove my innocence.
Though she yelled about bashing her head and dying, she threw her body right at me. Her outstretched fingers deliberately ripped open my outer robe. But other than my own accessories on my waist, nothing else fell out. A flash of extreme malice crossed Song Xuxu's eyes. Just as she was about to fall onto the soft chair behind me, Fu Yunmo caught her around the waist. I sneered, "Sister, what kind of wall bashing is this? If you want to die, you shouldn't do it so half-heartedly. Let me teach you how." Before anyone could react, I grabbed the back of her collar and yanked her forward with all my might, slammed shut with a bang. She was slammed heavily against the wall. Bright red blood trickled out immediately. Now, that is called bashing your head against a wall. Do you understand? Staring into my cold eyes, Song Xuxu finally felt a sliver of chilling terror. She shrank back in fear, but I smiled. It seems one hit isn't enough to kill you. Since you are so eager to prove your innocence, let me help you further. A few more hits should do the trick. Once you are dead, the charges you fabricated against me will stick. She instantly shrieked.
Sung Qingyue, you are trying to silence me. Even if you kill me, you cannot change the fact that you slept with the bandits.
In front of everyone, my father's face turned ashen, and he slapped her across the face.
Enough. Stealing your sister's marriage wasn't enough. And now you make up these filthy accusations to slander your sister. I do not have such an unfilial and unrighteous daughter like you.
Song Xuxu clutched her face, a trace of venom flashing in her eyes.
Father, I am also your daughter. Why do you never believe me? And only show favoritism to Song Qingyue? I said Song Qingyue was ruined by others, and I have proof.
I watched coldly as she pulled several letters from her sleeve, triumphantly displaying them to everyone. There was not a single word on the papers, only unspeakable vulgar erotic drawings, and the woman depicted in them was none other than me. The signatures at the bottom were all stamped with the black wolf emblem of the Juyuan Peak bandits. Everyone gasped in unison. and the way they looked at me became filled with scrutiny and suspicion. I remembered those looks. They were exactly the same as in my past life, when Song Xuxu pretended to tear open my clothes, causing a man's undergarments to fall out. Disdain, disgust, and mockery. It was as if I were a foul maggot in a muddy ditch. My mother stiffened and shielded me behind her, while my father defended me with a grim face.
This is impossible. I believe in Qingyue.
Song Xuxu's face contorted with smug triumph.
Sung Qingyue, what else do you have to say? You are just a loose, shameless wench. Even prostitutes are cleaner than you.
I held my parents' cold hands and let out a soft laugh. Under everyone's disdainful gazes, I unhurriedly revealed the virginity mark on my arm. In my past life, my virginity mark had been covered by a wound, leaving me with no way to prove myself. Now, looking at Song Xuxu's gradually freezing smile, I raised my hand and slapped her hard, sending her face twisting aside as 2 teeth flew out and hit the ground. Fu Yunmo rushed forward in distress to shield her, glaring at me fiercely.
Song Qingyue, Xuxu, was only playing a small joke on you. Yet you are so domineering and full of jealousy. You are simply not fit to be the mistress of my Marquis household. If you know what is good for you, I will raise your status to that of a concubine. If you do not, then wait to be cursed and spurned by everyone in the capital. I'd like to see, once the Marquis household calls off the engagement, who would still dare to have you. In this life, you'll only be fit to shave your head and become a nun.
A joke. I looked on coldly at this man whom I had treated with all my heart and soul for several years. After the old Marquis passed away, the mediocre and untalented Fu Yunmo inherited the title of Marquis. In just 3 short months, he not only bungled the tasks given by the emperor to pieces, but because his ambitions far exceeded his abilities, he also offended many officials. The emperor completely gave up on the Guangping Marquis household. In the blink of an eye, the household fell into decline, shunned by the imperial court. They were so poor they could barely keep food on the table, and even the lowliest street patrolman could trample all over them. It was I, remembering our childhood friendship, who aided him and encouraged him, and even persuaded my father to support him. He had knelt before my father, crying as he swore an oath.
If I ever fail her in this lifetime, may lightning strike me down, and may I die a horrible death.
In just 2 short years, he climbed into the center of power, yet he had long forgotten his initial oath. Now, he could even shamelessly say that letting me be a concubine was doing me a favor. The disgust in my eyes was completely undisguised. I turned my head to look at my parents. Father, mother, let us call off this marriage with the Marquis household. I am willing to marry into the Xu family. My father looked at me with a mixture of shock and deep emotion.
Qingyue, but you are the daughter of the general's household. Marrying into the Xu family would truly be a grievance for you.
Father, I smiled and interrupted. The Xu family is boundlessly righteous. In the face of national crisis, they stepped forward to donate food and supplies for the border soldiers. Such moral integrity is rare in this world. Not to mention that Xu Lang is now the top scholar of the imperial examinations and a direct disciple of the emperor. In due time, he will surely bring honor to his ancestors. By marrying into the Xu family, your daughter does not feel wronged at all. One is a concubine's daughter who stole her legitimate sister's marriage out of greed for wealth and even tried to frame her sister's reputation. The other is a noble, responsible, legitimate daughter who married down to repay a debt of gratitude for the general's mansion. The difference is like night and day, clear for all to see. Many people present choked up with emotion, feeling guilty for having misunderstood me just now, and despising Song Xuxu's behavior even more. But Fu Yunmo seemed to have been triggered by something. He stopped us like a madman.
The marriage between the Marquis of Qingyue's estate and the general's estate was bestowed by the emperor. Xuxu is the one I married and brought home in a grand sedan chair. She is my official wife, but I didn't say I wouldn't marry you either. If you leave today, then the general's estate will be the one defying an imperial decree.
Mother grit her teeth in anger.
The emperor's decree was for the general's legitimate daughter to be your wife. It is your Marquis mansion that has gone too far, yet you dare to make false accusations.
Fu Yunmo said as if it were only natural.
Then I will just let Qingyue be an equal wife.
Since ancient times, there has only been one wife. An equal wife might sound nice as a wife, but in reality, she is just a higher class concubine. There was nothing technically wrong with his words, but everyone could see this was a slap in the face to the general's mansion. Furious and overwhelmed, he clutched his chest, gasping violently, nearly passing out. With eyes red with anger, my mother wanted to demand justice for me, but was backed into a corner and left speechless. Song Xuxu swayed her hips and snuggled into Fu Yunmo's arms, smiling triumphantly.
Sung Qingyue, you are still beneath me after all. Now come over here, kneel, and serve tea to grandmother.
Song Xuxu's maid yanked me violently, causing me to stumble. My mother tried to stop them in anger, but the Marquis's servants, riding on their master's coattails, shoved her hard to the ground. Song Xuxu raised an eyebrow, saying,
Madam, since you insisted on meddling, if you insist on forcing your way in and end up getting hurt, you can only blame yourself. and say it is your own fault.
I helped my mother up and looked coldly at this despicable couple. Fu Yunmo curled his lips, wearing a smug expression of having achieved his goal.
A married daughter is like spilt water. From now on, I am your sky. Why haven't you come over to bow to Xuxu and me?
Seeing that I did not budge, 2 servants pinned down my shoulders, kicked the back of my knees, and forcefully forced my head down to kowtow on the ground. I gritted my teeth, holding myself up against the ground with all my might. Just as my forehead was about to touch the floor, a loud shout suddenly came from outside the door.
An imperial decree has arrived, Marquis household. Receive the decree.
My heart eased, and I let out a long sigh of relief. The timing was just perfect, but when I turned around, I couldn't help but freeze. The person who came with the eunuch announcing the decree was actually Lord Shu. He was leading a troop of imperial guards close behind. The eunuch glanced at him and handed him the imperial decree with a smile.
Lord Shu, this decree is what you requested, so you should be the one to read it.
Shu Lang accepted it politely. His cold eyes swept across the crowd, but when his gaze fell upon me, the corners of his mouth curved up slightly.
Marquis household, receive the decree.
Fu Yunmo's face turned grim, and a terrible premonition crept into his heart. He was dragged down to kneel by the panicked old madame of the Marquis household.
By imperial decree of His Majesty, the Marquis of Guangping disregarded the imperial will of the arranged marriage and conspired with Song Xuxu to substitute the bride with another, stealthily swapping the marriage. The marriage between the general's household and the Marquis of Guangping's household is hereby annulled. The Marquis of Guangping is stripped of his noble title and demoted to a commoner. Song Xuxu, who deceived her superiors and misled her subordinates, and acted with filial impiety and betrayal, is bestowed upon Fu Yunmo as a low-ranking concubine, never to be elevated in status for the rest of her life. Song Qingyue, the legitimate daughter of the general's household, is virtuous and respectful, and is both deeply affectionate and dutiful, is hereby betrothed to Shu Lang, Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, as his primary wife, with the wedding to be held on an auspicious date chosen by the Imperial Academy of Astronomy. Respect this.
As soon as he finished speaking, the entire courtyard fell into dead silence.
Fu Yunmo, accept the decree.
Shu Lang stood tall and straight, his tone cold and indifferent. The son of a merchant, once despised by everyone, had now risen to become a favored minister of the emperor, appointed as the third-rank minister of the Court of Judicial Review. Meanwhile, the once glorious prospective son-in-law of the general's mansion had in the blink of an eye become a commoner with absolutely nothing. One kneeling, one standing. The irony was supreme. Deeply shaken, Fu Yunmo lost his voice for a moment before roaring.
Impossible. How could His Majesty strip me of my title of Marquis? How dare you forge an imperial decree? Do you want to die?
He tried to lung forward, but was kicked to the ground by an imperial guard standing nearby. Eunuch Yang, who served by the emperor's side, looked down at Fu Yunmo with disdain.
You are now a mere commoner. How dare you assault a minister of the imperial court? I think the one who wants to die is you.
Fu Yunmo scrambled forward on his hands and knees, grabbing the hem of Eunuch Yang's robe.
Eunuch Yang, I want to see His Majesty. There must be a mistake. I did not defy the imperial decree. I will marry Song Qingyue.
Give me a break. Marry the eldest Miss Song as a concubine for your Marquis' mansion.
Eunuch Yang disgustedly pulled his sleeve back.
With eldest Miss Song's status, she is worthy of being above all others. Her marrying you was already a blessing brought by the accumulated virtues of your family ancestors. Yet, you did not cherish it, and even wanted to make her a concubine, humiliating her in public. If the general's mansion didn't deal with you, who would? You must understand, it wasn't because of the Marquis mansion that you could marry eldest Miss Song, but rather, only because she was willing to marry you could your Marquis' mansion bring honor to its ancestors. A short-sighted, foolish, and self-ignorant man like you deserves to have the Marquis mansion ruined in your hands.
He glanced at Song Xuxu, who was hiding behind Fu Yunmo, and scoffed, utterly foolish. Having said that, he nodded to my father and turned to leave. As soon as he left, Song Xuxu threw herself at Fu Yunmo, crying and screaming.
Husband, I don't want to be a low-class concubine. You promised me that you would make me your primary wife and love only me in this lifetime.
Furious, the Dowager Marchioness slapped her hard across the face.
This is all because of you, shameless wench. It was you who seduced my son, making him lose his mind and give up. A perfectly fine, noble lady, just to marry a seductive vixen like you. Look at us now. My son has lost his title, and our estate is ruined. And yet, you are still only thinking about being the primary wife. You are a family-ruining curse. Get out of here, even if it costs my old life. I will never let you cross the threshold of my Fu family.
Song Xuxu wept, her face covered in tears. She collapsed weakly into Fu Yunmo's arms after all. She was the woman he loved. He spoke up to shield her.
Mother, I will not give up on Xuxu, no matter what. Everyone in the capital knows of our marriage. If you throw her out now, it will be the death of her.
The Dowager Marchioness pulled the hairpin from her hair and pressed it against her throat.
It is all because of this lowly vixen who has brought ruin to our household. If you continue to shield her today, I will end my life right here.
Fu Yunmo turned pale with fright. He rushed forward to stop her, but Song Xuxu held on to him tightly.
Husband, you cannot abandon me.
Yunmo, today it is either her or me. Do you want to watch your mother die before your eyes?
Fu Yunmo was being driven mad. Just as he was about to shake off Song Xuxu, she cried out loudly.
Husband, you cannot abandon me. I am already carrying your child.
Fu Yunmo whipped his head around, his face filled with wild ecstasy. Is that true? Song Xuxu, with red eyes, nodded weakly and delicately.
It has been over a month. The physician said, it is a boy.
The Dowager Marchioness looked like a choked duck, mouth agape, unable to make a sound for the longest time.
Mother, you have a grandson. This is my first child. Xuxu is the great benefactor of our family. Please, accept her for the sake of the child.
The hairpin clattered to the ground. The Dowager Marchioness seemed to age decades in an instant. Her eyes closed, filled with pain and conflict, and she allowed her servants to support her as she left. I looked coldly at the two embracing each other, and curtly gave the command. Two imperial guards stepped forward. Only when Song Xuxu was seized did she finally react, her face pale with terror.
Song Qingyue, what do you think you're doing?
You just incited your servants to push and shove my mother, and forced me to kowtow. What do you think I'm going to do? Considering that you are pregnant, you will kowtow 50 times, and receive 30 slaps to the face. Song Xuxu screamed.
No, you can't do this to me.
Unfortunately, no matter how she cried and threw a tantrum, it could not change the outcome. Fu Yunmo's eyes nearly split with rage.
Song Qingyue, if you are angry, direct it at me. Do not hurt Xuxu.
His self-righteous look, absolutely convinced I was seeking revenge, out of heartbreak, made me want to retch. Do you think you can escape? Kowtow 100 times, and receive 100 slaps. To the satisfying sounds of slaps and kowtows, my father, mother, and I left with the dowry. Xu Lang caught up with me, pulled a piece of jade from his robe, and handed it to me.
This is a family heirloom left by my mother. Meant for her future daughter-in-law. Please do not look down on it. Take this as a token of our betrothal for now. I will prepare the betrothal gifts and visit your home as soon as possible. Wait for me.
I felt the smooth, silky texture of the jade in my hand. I doubted a piece of jade this exquisite could be found in the entire capital. Yet, he actually worried I might look down on it. Weren't you betrothed to Song Xuxu long ago? Why didn't you give this jade to her? The moment the question left my mouth, I immediately regretted it. The tenderness overflowing from the depths of Xu Lang's eyes made me feel completely at a loss.
It was naturally kept for you. The one I have always wanted to marry is you. But I knew you were out of my reach. When the general's mansion betrothed the second young lady to me, I knew she was involved with Fu Yunmo.
I was surprised that he would be so candid. You knew that, yet you still came to marry her as agreed. He smiled.
Because I guessed he would swap the brides. And I also expected that you would agree to marry me.
This man actually calculated everything without a single mistake. As expected, no merchant is without guile. No wonder they say he passed the imperial exam to become the top scholar as soon as he took it, and even got the emperor to break protocol and promote him to Minister of the Court of Judicial Review. He reached out, pausing for a moment by my ear, and then tucked a stray lock of hair behind it.
All my scheming was used just to marry you. If you like, I can even rise to the position of Prime Minister.
In a panic, I covered his mouth, deeply afraid that if he continued, he would blurt out that he could even fight to become the emperor for me. With blushing ears, I softly urged him, "Go back now. I will wait for you." Upon returning to the general's mansion, concubine who had snuck out of the ancestral hall without permission, saw me returning with everyone else, and instantly beamed with joy.
Eldest young lady, did the Marquis's mansion call off the engagement with you? I always said my daughter was the Golden Phoenix. Yet you insisted on going there to humiliate yourself, being swept out of the door by the Marquis's mansion. How does that feel? The position of the Marchioness rightfully belongs to my daughter. From now on, I am the mother-in-law of the Marquis of Guangping. You had better show me some respect, if you please me now. On the day my daughter returns to visit her parental home, I might say a few good words for you. and have my son-in-law take you in as a lowly concubine.
Looking at how she was deliberately puffing out her chest, I let out a scoff. What concubine who? Have you not heard the news yet? The Marquis of Guangping is no more. Your daughter did marry Fu Yunmo though, just as you wished. She will be a lowly concubine for the rest of her life. Concubine whose eyes widened in disbelief.
That is impossible. My daughter is the Marquise's formal wife, the mistress of the household. You're just jealous of her.
I shrugged. Believe what you want. After saying that, I turned and walked away, ignoring her face, which was distorted with rage as she shrieked curses. My wedding with Xu Lang was set for 2 months later. The Grand Princess specially invited me to the Jade Flower Feast. While strolling in the back garden with my maid to enjoy the flowers, I unexpectedly ran into Fu Yunmo. I had no idea what means he had used to sneak into the Grand Princess's manor. He looked at me with a deeply hurt and heartbroken expression.
Qingyue, how have you been these days?
Frowning, I stepped back to distance myself from him. Fu Yunmo, how I am doing has absolutely nothing to do with you. If you don't want me to have you thrown out, then leave at once. He paid no heed to my words and grabbed my arm, pouring out his grievances with a self-proclaimed deep affection.
It was my fault. I was deceived by Song Xuxu's gentle and submissive disguise. She seduced me. She didn't truly love me either. It was all just to become the Marquise's wife. A selfish, greedy, and vain woman like her cannot compare to you at all. Ever since the day you left, I have lost my appetite and been unable to sleep. Did I realize the person I have always loved most in my heart is you? Without you, I have been living like a soulless puppet. I've thought it over. As long as you come back to me, I won't mind. Your betrothal to Xu Lang. The position of formal wife is still reserved for.
Perhaps because I had heard too many disgusting words, I didn't feel the slightest ripple of emotion in my heart. I am even completely unfazed and find it somewhat laughable. If I marry you, what about Song Xuxu? He waved his hand dismissively.
She is nothing but a plaything, not even fit to carry your shoes. My estate can certainly afford to feed a lowly concubine. It won't affect your position as my primary wife at all.
When all was said and done, he wanted his sweet companion, yet could not bear to part with wealth and status. Fu Yunmo's sheer selfishness made me regret my past blindness all over again. My maid couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. If young Master Fu's skin were used to build city walls, surely no sword or spear could ever pierce through. When you were the Marquis, my lady didn't even care for you. Now that you are a second-hand commoner, you still dare to dream of my lady marrying down to you? Keep dreaming. To be spoken down to by a mere maid. Fu Yunmo's face turned incredibly ugly. Shame turning into anger, he bellowed behind me.
Song Qingyue, if you don't marry me, tomorrow I will go out and spread the word that I took your virginity long ago. I'll see if a piece of ruined goods like you is still wanted by Xu Lang.
My face grew cold, and just as I was about to snap back in anger, Fu Yunmo was suddenly grabbed by the back of his collar. Before he could even cry out, Xu Lang shoved his head straight into the nearby lotus pond.
Since young Master Fu has such a foul mouth, I'll help you wash it clean.
The pond water bubbled and gurgled, and soon all movement ceased. Only when Fu Yunmo's limbs went limp did Xu Lang let go and drag him out. The Grand Princess soon arrived with her attendants. Fu Yunmo was like a dead dog, clutching his neck as he collapsed on the ground. The Grand Princess frowned in disgust and ordered the servants.
Throw him out, how utterly unlucky. He has dirtied my whole pond of lotuses.
A warm cloak was draped over my shoulders. I turned my head and exchanged a smile with Xu Lang. After the banquet concluded, Xu Lang insisted on escorting me back to the general's estate. But on the way, we nearly ran into someone. The carriage driver called out loudly through the curtain.
Young master, someone is blocking the road. It is a pregnant woman.
Xu Lang gently comforted me before speaking up.
If someone is blocking the way, detour around them to take Miss Song back to the general's mansion first.
The driver hesitated, wanting to say something.
The one blocking the road is the concubine of the Fu family, the second Miss Song.
Song Xuxu and Fu Yunmo, indeed cut from the same cloth. No sooner had Fu Yunmo finished his hypocritical display here than Song Xuxu came right after him to pour out her longing. Young Master Xu, she called out delicately from outside. Seeing Xu Lang come out, she eagerly approached him with red, teary eyes. Xu Lang took 2 steps back.
Miss Song, if you have something to say, speak plainly. I still have important matters to attend to.
She wrung her handkerchief, looking utterly humiliated and broken.
I know you will certainly not forgive me. I only came today to tell you that I had no other choice. On the wedding day, my elder sister did not want to marry Fu Yunmo. She drugged me and forced me into her bridal sedan chair. By the time I woke up, my innocence had already been taken by Fu Yunmo. I wanted to end my life right then and there, but I couldn't stand by and watch you be deceived by Song Qingyue's wicked, fake facade, marrying a vicious, venomous woman into your house. If that happened, I wouldn't even be able to rest in peace if I died.
She wept, her makeup completely ruined by her tears.
The one I have always loved in my heart is you, and the man I wanted to marry is also you. But I know I have no face to meet you, and I dare not hope to marry you anymore. I only hope you will be happy for the rest of your life.
Song Xuxu's acting had always been superb. Back at the general's mansion, she had fooled many people with this exact trick. She thought herself invincible in her schemes, but Xu Lang happened to be the sole exception, even though her voice was nearly hoarse from crying, and the chilly water on her handkerchief was losing its effect, making it impossible to squeeze out any more tears. Xu Lang remained completely unfazed, looking at her as if she were a mere clown. His gaze made her grow increasingly stiff and anxious. Xu Lang offered a superficial smile.
Second Miss Song, you claim that Fu Yunmo took your innocence on the wedding night, but that belly of yours couldn't possibly be the result of just that wedding night.
Song Xuxu's face turned pale in an instant. Before she could say anything else, a figure rushed out with a furious roar. Fu Yunmo grabbed her by the hair, his eyes filled with rage.
You bitch. Was I not good to you? How dare you go out and seduce other men?
Song Xuxu cried and pleaded her innocence, but Fu Yunmo was in no mood to listen. He was in a complete mess, being thrown out of the Princess Royal's manor and suffering the humiliation of everyone's ridicule, made it impossible for him to ever hold his head up again. All of this was because he had married Song Xuxu, this woman. He began to recall his past glory, and then looked at his current state of ruin. Furious, he completely lost control, raining punch after punch down on Song Xuxu.
It is all because of you. My Marquis manor is gone, and Qingyue doesn't want me anymore. How dare you betray me on top of that? I'll beat you to death, you unfaithful bitch.
He beat her for who knows how long, until Song Xuxu didn't even have the strength to cry out in pain. Only then did Fu Yunmo suddenly snap out of it. At the sight of the blood pooling beneath her, fearing it would offensive to my eyes, Xu Lang left the carriage driver behind to fetch a physician and escorted me back to the general's manor himself. Before long, news spread throughout the capital that Fu Yunmo had beaten his concubine to death in the street, and on his second day in prison, he was poisoned to death in his cell. The culprit was Auntie Hu. She had bribed the prison guard to slip a heavy dose of arsenic into Fu Yunmo's food. By the time the authorities found her, she had already hanged herself in a thatched cottage. In a month, Xu Lang and I were wed, with the emperor himself presiding over the ceremony. After our marriage, we had a son and a daughter. Xu Lang treated me with unchanging devotion for 10 years, as if it were a single day. The rest of my life in this world has been a smooth journey.